hot tub was the one thing he truly loved about his backyard. It wasn't huge, it wasn't fancy, but it was his. After long days at work, he liked to step outside, listen to the soft bubbling sound, and let the warmth soak away his stress. It was private, tucked behind a wooden fence, and it felt like his own little escape from the world. He had spent money to buy it, hours to set it up, and even more effort to keep it clean and well-maintained. For him, it was not just a hot tub. It was a reward, a personal space, a sign that sometimes hard work paid off. But his peace did not last long because of his neighbor. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. People called her Karen, though of course that wasn't her real name. She was the type of person who always thought she was in charge, even when she wasn't. She believed she had the right to tell everyone else how to live. If someone's grass was too long, she complained. If a car was parked in what she thought was the wrong spot, she left nasty notes. If a neighbor had a party, she showed up to scold them for being too loud. Even when she had her own gatherings that went late into the night, Karen had lived in the neighborhood for years. She acted like the president of the HOA, even though she wasn't. The real HOA president was a quiet man who barely showed up to meetings. Karen filled that gap by marching around the community, pointing out what she thought were violations, and acting as if she had the final word on every decision. Some neighbors avoided her, some tried to stay on her good side, but most of them simply rolled their eyes whenever she started one of her lectures. At first, the homeowner tried to ignore her. When he first set up his hot tub, she stopped by his backyard and gave him a fake smile, saying she hoped it followed all HOA regulations. He had already checked, of course, and it did. He brushed off her comment, thinking that would be the end of it. Couldn't have been more wrong. One evening, after a tiring day, he came home looking forward to soaking in the hot tub. The sun had just gone down, and he could see the steam rising gently over the wooden fence. But when he stepped into his backyard, he froze. Voices, laughter, splashes. For a moment he thought maybe his ears were playing tricks on him, but then he saw it. Strangers, people he had never seen before, were sitting in his hot tub. 3 of them holding drinks, laughing loudly, and making themselves comfortable like they owned the place. His hot tub, the one he had worked so hard for, the one he cleaned and treated with care, was filled with strangers. He stood there in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. Finally he shouted, asking what they were doing. The strangers looked startled, but one of them said, "Oh, Karen told us we could use it. She said it's fine." Karen. Of course it was Karen. The anger rushed through him so fast he could hardly breathe. He stormed over to Karen's house, which was just 2 doors down, and knocked hard on her door. She opened it, with that same smug smile she always wore, like she was already prepared to argue. "You let people into my hot tub?" he said, his voice sharp. "They're my guests," Karen replied casually, as if that explained everything. "I told them they could use it. It's no big deal." "No big deal," he repeated, almost laughing from disbelief. "It's my hot tub. You don't have the right to let anyone into it." Karen crossed her arms. "This is a community neighborhood. You shouldn't be selfish. Some of us don't have the space or money for things like that. It's nice to share once in a while." He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Share? That's not sharing. That's trespassing. They're strangers. They're using my property without my permission." Karen rolled her eyes as if he was being dramatic. "Don't be ridiculous. They're good people. You're just overreacting. Honestly, you should feel flattered that people want to use it." Flattered. That word nearly made his blood boil. He wasn't flattered. He was furious. The hot tub wasn't a community pool. It wasn't part of the HOA. It was his. He bought it, paid for the water, the electricity, the maintenance. And now Karen, who had no right at all, was acting like she could hand out invitations to anyone she pleased. He told her firmly never to do it again. That the hot tub was off limits, that she and her guests had crossed a serious line. Jess smirked and said, "We'll see." Then she closed the door on him. That night, he drained the hot tub and scrubbed it clean. He didn't know where those people had come from, or what they might have done in the water. He felt disgusted, violated, and more than anything, angry. This wasn't just about the hot tub anymore. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. It was about Karen believing she could take whatever she wanted without consequence. As he worked late into the night, cleaning and refilling the tub, he couldn't stop thinking about her smug face and her words. "We'll see." It wasn't just a dismissal. It was a threat. It was her way of saying she would do it again, whether he liked it or not. And deep down, he knew she would. The next few days were tense. He kept a sharp eye on his backyard, checking the hot tub every evening as if expecting intruders to pop out of it again. He had been clear with Karen. He had told her in no uncertain terms to keep her guests out of his property, but Karen wasn't the type to listen. She wasn't the type to back down. She thrived on control, on pushing boundaries, on making other people feel like they had no choice but to obey her. For a little while, things seemed quiet. He began to hope that maybe she had finally taken him seriously. Maybe, just maybe, she had realized she had gone too far. But that hope didn't last long. It happened again only a week later. He came home one afternoon and instantly heard laughter. Spilling over the fence, his stomach sank. He already knew what he was about to see. He walked quickly into his backyard, and there it was again. More strangers. This time, there were 5 of them, squeezed into the hot tub, drinks in hand, splashing water around like they were at some cheap resort. The sight nearly made him explode. He shouted over the fence, demanding to know what they were doing. Again, the answer was the same. Karen said we could. Karen. Again. He stormed down the path, marched up to her front door, pounded on it so hard that a few neighbors peeked out of their windows. Karen answered slowly, almost lazily, as if she had been expecting him. "What is wrong with you?" He barked. "I told you, this is my property. I told you to stay away from my hot tub. And now you've got even more people in there." Karen didn't even flinch. She tilted her head, gave him that same superior smirk, and said, "Don't be so uptight. They're just having fun. You act like you're the only one who deserves to enjoy life around here." "They're trespassing," he shouted. "You don't get to invite people into something that doesn't belong to you." Karen's smirk widened. "You live in an HOA community. That means we share. That hot tub is just sitting there most of the time. What's the harm in letting a few neighbors enjoy it once in a while? Honestly, you're being selfish." Selfish. That word hit him like a slap in the face. He worked hard to afford that hot tub. He paid for every cent of it, every gallon of water, every chemical that kept it clean. And now she was trying to twist the situation to make him the bad guy? He stood there fuming, his hands clenched into fists, but Karen just leaned against her door frame like she was bored of the conversation. "Look," she said finally, "if you don't want people using it, maybe you should just join in instead of acting like the Grinch. Lighten up." The sheer arrogance of her words made him feel sick. He realized at that moment that she wasn't going to stop. No matter what he said, no matter how much he protested, she was going to keep doing this. To her, it wasn't even about the hot tub anymore. It was about control. It was about proving that she could do whatever she wanted, and there was nothing he could do about it. That night, he drained and scrubbed the hot tub again, angry and exhausted. As he worked, his mind kept replaying the confrontation. He thought about Karen's smug face, her condescending tone, the way she twisted the situation to make him look like the unreasonable one. And he thought about the strangers, people who didn't even live in the neighborhood, sitting in his hot tub like it was theirs. It wasn't just disrespect, it was a violation. He felt like his home, his sanctuary, wasn't safe anymore. He couldn't relax in his own backyard without wondering who might be in it next. He couldn't enjoy his hot tub without imagining strangers soaking in it while he was gone. For the next couple of days, he tried to calm down, told himself maybe she'd had her fun and would finally move on. But deep down, he knew better. Karen wasn't the type to move on. She was the type to push harder every time someone pushed back. And sure enough, 2 nights later, it happened again. This time he didn't hear them right away. He walked into his backyard, expecting peace, but the hot tub cover was already pushed aside. Steam rose into the night air, and there they were, another group of people he didn't know, laughing and splashing as if it was some kind of public spa. He lost it. He shouted at them to get out immediately, his voice shaking with rage. scrambled out, embarrassed and confused, muttering about how Karen told them it was fine. One of them even had the nerve to ask if they could finish their drinks first. He stood there, staring at the water swirling with their mess, and something inside him snapped. Talking wasn't working. Warnings weren't working. Karen wasn't listening, and she wasn't going to. She thought she was untouchable. She thought he couldn't stop her. That night, he didn't just drain the tub. He sat outside staring at it for hours, thinking. His anger turned into something colder, sharper. If Karen wanted to play games, he could play too, unlike her. He was going to be smart about it. He began searching for solutions. Thought about locks, about fences, about motion sensor alarms, but he knew Karen would find ways around them. She was too bold, too shameless. He needed something that would embarrass her. Something that would hit her where it hurt most, her pride, as the hours ticked by. He sat with his laptop glowing in the dark, scrolling through articles, videos, and forums. And then finally, he found something that made him pause. It was harmless. It was clever. It would make sure that the next time Karen or her guests trespassed, they wouldn't get away with it so easily. A plan began to form in his mind. And for the first time in weeks, he smiled. That night, when he sat in front of his laptop, the glow of the screen reflected off his tired face. He had been searching for hours. He typed words like how to stop trespassers and ways to catch neighbors using hot tub into the search bar. Most of what came up were boring suggestions. Install a taller fence, put a lock on the gate, call the HOA, or file a police report. He had thought about all of those already, but none of them felt satisfying. A lock could be cut. A fence could be climbed. The HOA, they were useless. And calling the police would only bring drama into his life without really solving the problem. What he wanted wasn't just to keep Karen out. He wanted to teach her a lesson. He wanted her to regret ever crossing into his property. He wanted her to feel that same anger and frustration he had felt every time he found strangers lounging in the water he paid for. He rubbed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. Thinking then, he remembered something he had once heard about. Pools. A friend had told him years ago that there was a type of dye you could put in water that would change color if someone peed in it. It had been a silly conversation at the time, more of a joke than anything serious. But now the memory made him sit up straighter. If there was dye that could react to urine, maybe there was something similar that could react to trespassers in another way. He typed in new searches: hot tub prank dye, pool color change dye, safe skin, dye to catch trespassers. At first, he wasn't sure if he'd find anything real, but then he stumbled onto a forum for pool owners. Buried in one of the threads, someone had posted about a product that could be poured into water. It wasn't dangerous, it wasn't permanent, but it stained skin temporarily. The person described it as a harmless prank used at parties. The dye clung to skin and turned it a bright, bold purple. The effect lasted a couple of days before fading. His eyes widened as he read. It was exactly what he needed. It's not harmful, not illegal, but humiliating. He imagined Karen sitting in his hot tub, smug and confident, and then climbing out with purple streaks all over her arms and legs. He pictured her guests looking at each other in horror, realizing they couldn't wash it off quickly. He imagined the panic, the embarrassment, the anger. And most of all, he imagined Karen trying to explain it to the neighbors when people asked what had happened. He couldn't help but laugh quietly to himself. It was perfect. The next day, he ordered the dye online. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day that passed, he felt nervous that Karen might strike again before his plan was ready. But thankfully, the package arrived within the week. He brought it inside like it was treasure. The small bottle didn't look like much, but to him, it felt like power. Finally, he had something that would give Karen a taste of her own medicine. He read the instructions carefully. It was safe for pools and hot tubs, harmless to the water system, and temporary on the skin. He tested a few drops in a bucket of water first, just to be sure. When he dipped his hand in and then pulled it out, faint purple lines appeared across his skin. He scrubbed at them with soap and water, and though they faded a little, the stain was still visible. He smiled, satisfied. That night, when the neighborhood grew quiet, He slipped into his backyard and poured the dye into the hot tub, the bubbling water mixed it quickly, and within minutes, it was invisible. To anyone looking, the hot tub looked normal, clear, inviting. But he knew what would happen when someone climbed inside to make sure he didn't miss the show. He also set up a small security camera near the fence, angled perfectly at the hot tub. He wanted proof, wanted to see Karen's reaction, to watch the moment she realized she had been caught. He imagined himself replaying the footage later, maybe even showing it to the HOA if she tried to twist the story against him. When everything was ready, he sat in his house with a strange mix of excitement and nerves. A part of him wondered if Karen might surprise him and stay away this time. But another part of him, the larger part, knew she wouldn't. Karen had already shown him that she believed she could get away with anything. She thought he was weak, that he wouldn't fight back. And that made him even more eager to see her fall into his trap. The next day passed slowly. Every time he heard laughter outside or saw a group of people walking down the street, his heart raced. Was it them? Were they going to his hot tub now? Kept checking the camera feed, watching and waiting. Hours ticked by with nothing happening. The hot tub sat quietly under the fading sunlight, bubbling softly as if it too was waiting. And then, just as the evening turned dark, he heard it. Voices, laughter. The sound of the hot tub cover being dragged aside. He grabbed his phone and opened the camera feed. And there they were, in a group of guests, carrying drinks, giggling like teenagers sneaking into a pool. She waved her arms dramatically as if she were giving them a grand tour. Without hesitation, they climbed in. He leaned forward, his eyes glued to the screen. The first few minutes were normal. They laughed, splashed, and clinked their glasses together. But then it began. Slowly at first, one of the guests looked down. At his arm, confused, he rubbed it, frowning. Another woman glanced at her leg and gasped. Karen herself leaned back against the edge, lifted her hand out of the water, and froze. Purple, it started faint, but within moments the dye spread across their skin like ink. Purple streaks climbed up their arms, blotched across their legs, and painted their faces wherever the water touched. The camera caught everything, the confusion, the panic, the shouting. One woman screamed, "What's happening to me?" Another man tried to climb out quickly, only to slip and splash back in. Making the dye spread even more, Karen was the loudest of them all. She shouted, demanded answers, cursed the water, and tried scrubbing her arms frantically, but the color didn't budge. Her guests stared at her like it was her fault, which of course it was. Inside his house, he was laughing so hard he had to cover his mouth. His plan had worked better than he had imagined. They looked like cartoon characters who had fallen into a vat of paint. The more they panicked, the funnier it became. But even through his laughter, he felt something else to relief. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, he felt in control. He had taken his hot tub back. Karen might have thought. She could walk over him forever, but now she knew better. And this was only the beginning. The moment the dye began to show, the whole scene turned into chaos. At first, it was just confusion. One of Karen's guests rubbed his arm and frowned, thinking maybe it was just the lighting. Another laughed nervously, saying it looked like a rash. But then, more and more of them noticed the strange purple marks spreading across their skin. Within minutes, the giggles stopped. The smiles disappeared. The backyard filled with gasps, shouts, and panic. The dye was doing exactly what he had hoped. It clung to their skin like a stain, bright purple under the lights. The water splashed higher as people scrambled to get out, but every movement made it worse. Each second they spent in the water, the color deepened. One woman shrieked when she looked down at her legs. Another man cursed loudly when he saw his hands. They were all drenched in glowing blotches of purple, like they had been dipped in paint. Karen was the loudest of them all. She threw her hands up, staring at her fingers in shock. "What is this?" she screamed. Her voice cracked as she demanded answers from everyone around her. She shouted at the guests, shouted at the hot tub, shouted at the night sky, as if the universe itself had betrayed her. But no matter how loud she screamed, the purple didn't wash away. The homeowner watched from inside his house, his phone screen showing the live feed from the camera he had set up. He was hunched forward on the couch, one hand clamped over his mouth to stop his laughter from spilling out too loudly. His body shook as he tried to hold it in. He didn't want to miss a single second. On the screen, Karen tried to climb out. But even in the dim light, he could see her legs were stained, a shocking shade of violet. She stumbled onto the patio, dripping water everywhere, her guests following close behind. One woman grabbed a garden hose and tried to spray herself down, but the color wouldn't go away. The harder they scrubbed, the more frustrated they became. Why won't it come off? One of them shouted, "This is your fault, Karen." Another snapped, "You said it was fine. You said it was safe." The homeowner nearly choked on his laughter. He could practically hear the blame beginning to shift. The guests, who had been smiling at Karen only minutes earlier, were now glaring at her like she had ruined their lives. Karen barked back, telling them to calm down, insisting it must be some kind of chemical problem with the hot tub.
She tried
to act like she was still in control, but her purple-stained arms betrayed her. The guests didn't buy it. One man stormed off, muttering that he had work the next morning and couldn't show up, looking like he had been attacked by paint. Another woman threatened to call someone about it, though she didn't say who. Everyone was pointing fingers now, and all of them pointed at Karen. Meanwhile, he sat back in his chair, enjoying every second. This was better than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about balance. For weeks, Karen had disrespected him, ignored his boundaries, and acted like she owned everything. Now, she stood there, covered in purple, humiliated in front of her friends. And there was nothing she could do to spin it in her favor. After a few minutes, the group began to scatter. Some hurried down the street toward their cars, wrapping towels around themselves in a desperate attempt to hide the stains. Others walked quickly back into Karen's house, probably to try and scrub off the dye in her bathroom. Karen herself lingered in the backyard, shouting after them, promising she would figure it out, promising it wasn't permanent. But the look on her face told a different story. She knew she had lost control. The homeowner waited. He didn't go outside right away. He wanted Karen to stew in the embarrassment for a while. He watched as she paced back and forth in her yard, still wet, still purple, muttering angrily to herself. Eventually, she stomped toward his fence and shouted his name. He stepped outside, calmly, as if he had just been relaxing inside with no idea of what had happened. Karen glared at him, her face blotched with streaks of violet. "What did you do?" she screamed. Her voice was shrill, full of rage and desperation. He crossed his arms, keeping his expression neutral. "What are you talking about?" he asked, though of course he knew. "You put something in the hot tub," she shouted. "You poisoned it or something. Look at me." She held up her arms, which looked like they belonged to a cartoon character. He raised an eyebrow. "Why were you in my hot tub again, Karen?" That question stopped her cold. For a moment, she didn't have an answer, her mouth open, then closed again. Finally, she snapped, "That's not the point. The point is, you ruined my skin." He couldn't hold back a small laugh. "Ruined your skin? Karen, it looks like you ruined your own night. Hey, I told you not to trespass. If you weren't in my hot tub, you wouldn't be purple right now, would you?" Her face twisted with anger. "You can't do this. You can't just trap people like that. It's illegal." He shook his head slowly. "Illegal? No, Karen. What's illegal is you and your friends coming onto my property without permission. What's illegal is you inviting strangers to use something that doesn't belong to you. This," he pointed at her stained arms, "this is just what happens when you ignore boundaries." For once, Karen had no comeback. She stood there trembling with rage, her hands balled into fists, the purple stains glowing under the porch light. She looked like she wanted to scream again, but her voice caught in her throat. Finally, she turned sharply and stormed back toward her house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. He stayed outside for a while, breathing in the cool night air, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. He looked at the hot tub, still bubbling innocently, as if nothing unusual had happened. He chuckled to himself and shook his head. The dye had done its job. Later that night, he checked the camera footage again. Watching it a second time was even better. Seeing Karen's smug face turn to horror, seeing her guests panic, hearing the shouts and blame, it was priceless. Save the video in a special folder on his computer? Maybe he would never need it, but part of him liked knowing he had proof. If Karen ever tried to twist the story, he could show the truth. For the next couple of days, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. People noticed Karen's strange purple stains, even as they slowly faded. Wore long sleeves, but she couldn't hide everything. Neighbors who had seen the chaos from their windows spread the story quickly. Some laughed openly, others shook their heads, but everyone knew something had happened. And for once, it wasn't the homeowner who felt embarrassed. It was Karen. The purple stains did not stay forever, but the memory of them did. For days, Karen walked around the neighborhood with long sleeves and baggy pants, even though the weather was warm. She tried to cover up, but everyone had already seen. Some neighbors whispered about it. Some laughed openly, and some just shook their heads and said it was typical Karen. No one really believed her when she tried to explain it away. She told people it was an allergic reaction, or a problem with the hot tub chemicals, or even that someone had spilled paint near her. But the more excuses she gave, the less anyone trusted her story. The homeowner didn't need to explain anything. He stayed quiet and calm, which made people even more curious. Whenever he walked outside, he could feel eyes on him, but no one blamed him. In fact, many neighbors gave him knowing smiles, as if they secretly approved. For the first time since the whole mess had started, he felt respected again. Karen, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well. Some of her guests had gone back to their homes, still stained purple, and they weren't happy about it. A couple of them confronted her days later, demanding to know what had happened. They accused her of lying to them, of leading them into a humiliating situation. One even threatened to call a lawyer. Karen shouted back, insisting it wasn't her fault, but no one believed her. She was the one who had insisted they could use the hot tub. She was the one who had acted like it was her property to give away, and now she was the one left to deal with the fallout? Word spread quickly to the HOA. Complaints started piling up. Not against the homeowner, but against Karen. People had grown tired of her bossy behavior long before the purple incident.
Wow.
They had proof that she had crossed a line. The HOA board called a meeting, and for once Karen was the one being lectured. She argued, shouted, and tried to twist the story like she always did. But the purple stains on her skin and the angry voices of her neighbors drowned her out. The homeowner didn't even need to attend the meeting. He knew exactly what was happening when he saw Karen storming down the street afterward, her face red and her fists clenched. She looked smaller than usual, weaker, almost defeated. She avoided his house for days after that. Meanwhile, he finally felt peace return to his backyard. He sat in his hot tub again, leaning back into the warm bubbles, looking up at the stars. For weeks he had been too angry, too anxious to enjoy it. But now it felt different, and it felt safe again. Every time he closed his eyes and thought of Karen's shocked face when the purple dye appeared, he couldn't help but smile. It was justice, pure and simple. The neighborhood slowly adjusted too. People who had once sided with Karen stopped listening to her. She wasn't the loud leader she had tried to be. Instead, she became the subject of gossip and jokes. Whenever someone mentioned her, someone else would chuckle and say, "Careful, or she'll invite you to the purple spa." The nickname spread, and soon enough, Karen couldn't walk down the street without feeling the sting of embarrassment. One evening, the homeowner ran into a neighbor while checking his mail. The neighbor leaned in and whispered with a grin, "Heard about what happened?" That was genius. The homeowner only smiled, pretending he didn't know what the man was talking about. He liked it better that way. The less he said, the more people seemed to respect him. Karen did try one last time to confront him. A week later, she marched over, still trying to hold on to her pride, and accused him of setting her up. "You humiliated me on purpose," she said, her voice sharp but shaky. "You think you've won, but this isn't over." He looked at her calmly and said, "Karen, if you stay out of my hot tub, we won't have a problem. If you don't trespass, nothing like this will ever happen." Again, her eyes narrowed, but she didn't have an answer. For once, she had no power left. She turned and stomped away without another word. From that day on, the hot tub remained his and his alone. No strangers, no unexpected guests, no more laughter spilling over the fence. He could finally relax in peace. And he did. Many nights afterward, he sat in the warm water, listening to the soft bubbling sound, sipping a drink and enjoying the quiet. The stars above seemed brighter now, the air fresher, the whole world calmer. He had stood up for himself, and he had done it in a way that was clever, harmless, and unforgettable. Sometimes he would think back to that night, to the moment Karen first lifted her purple-stained hands out of the water. He could still see the shock on her face, still hear the panic in her voice, still feel the satisfaction rushing through him. He didn't need revenge anymore. He had already won. And so the story of the purple hot tub became a kind of legend in the neighborhood. People laughed about it for months, some even for years. It was the moment the balance of power shifted, the moment Karen lost her control, the moment the quiet homeowner proved that sometimes the best revenge wasn't shouting or fighting it, was letting someone trap themselves in their own arrogance. As for him, he kept living his life, enjoying his backyard, and smiling every time he remembered. The hot tub bubbled on, loyal and peaceful, and so did he.